I always believed that to solve a relationship problem, you need to talk about it, communicate, express, analyze. That's what every self-help book and therapist recommends, right? So why, on that Thursday night, sitting on the couch with Emily after our third definitive conversation of the week, did I feel more distant from her than ever? "I think we need to talk more," I said, repeating that automatic phrase that had become almost a mantra between us. Emily just nodded, with a look that mixed exhaustion and disbelief. We had just spent 2 hours solving our problems. 2 empty glasses of craft beer, enough words to fill a novel, and yet the silence that followed was so dense it seemed to form an invisible wall between us. Something didn't make sense. The math was wrong. More communication should mean more connection, shouldn't it? So why did each session of "let's talk about our relationship" seem to push us another inch apart? It wasn't like this in the beginning. In the first few months, our conversations about the relationship were rare but special. I remember one specific night, 6 months after we started dating, lying on a blanket at Central Park watching the stars when we talked about our fears and hopes. I felt so close to her it almost hurt. But at some point, something changed. By the time we hit our 2-year mark, I had developed a habit. At any sign of discomfort, a misinterpreted comment, a distant look during dinner, an unanswered text, I would initiate the talk. "I'm feeling like something's different. Can we talk about it?" Emily always agreed. At first, these conversations seemed productive. We'd leave them with the feeling that we had resolved something. But I soon realized we were having the same conversations repeatedly, just with slightly different words. Emily's facial expressions began to change when I would suggest we talk. First, it was a slight sigh, then a small twitch at the corner of her mouth, until it became a look of poorly disguised resignation. I noticed all of this, and ironically, my response was to suggest we talk about that discomfort too. One night, after one of these sessions, I realized we had spent more time talking about our relationship than living it. Our dates had transformed into continuous analyses of ourselves. What was once a garden that grew naturally had become an operating room, where every feeling was dissected under fluorescent light. "Do you feel closer after these conversations?" I asked one night. Emily hesitated. "I feel like we know each other better," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "But sometimes I feel like I'm being studied instead of being loved." That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. It was in an individual therapy session that I first heard about what my therapist called the hyperverbalization paradox. She explained that while communication is vital for healthy relationships, there's a point where overanalyzing can destroy the very thing we're trying to preserve. "Some aspects of relationships are like soap bubbles," she said. "If you try to hold them to examine them better, they simply burst between your fingers." She introduced me to relationship psychology studies, suggesting that couples who spend excessive time analyzing their dynamics often report less satisfaction than those who maintain a balance between communication and shared experience. The paradox is this: while a certain level of communication is essential for intimacy, excessive analysis can create a meta-relationship, a relationship about the relationship, that suffocates the spontaneity and authenticity that make real connection flourish. John Gottman, renowned relationship researcher at the University of Washington, discovered that many relationship problems, about 69%, are perpetual and have no solution. Not because they're impossible to resolve, but because they represent fundamental differences in personality, values, or needs. Trying to solve them through endless conversations only amplifies frustration. Suddenly, everything made sense. Each definitive conversation we had was like trying to capture water with our hands. The tighter we squeezed, the more it escaped between our fingers. With this understanding, I began to observe the same pattern in other aspects of life. My friends in Silicon Valley, who constantly analyzed their careers, seemed less satisfied than those who simply lived them. The parents in our Brooklyn neighborhood who obsessively researched parenting techniques seemed less connected with their children than those who spent more time simply playing with them. Philosopher Alan Watts called this the law of reverse effort. The more we try to force certain experiences, the more they elude us. It's like trying to relax with great effort or trying to have fun under pressure. It simply doesn't work. I realized this paradox applied perfectly to my relationship with Emily. Each time we transformed our feelings into objects of analysis, we lost the ability to simply feel them. The constant conversations about connection had become substitutes for connection itself. I began to understand that some aspects of relationships don't need to be verbalized to be real. Some forms of intimacy flourish in shared silence, in body language, or simply in being present without an agenda. A study from Harvard University found that couples who balanced moments of deep communication with periods of silent acceptance, moments where differences were acknowledged without needing immediate resolution, reported higher levels of long-term satisfaction. One Sunday afternoon, while preparing brunch together in our Manhattan apartment, I noticed Emily was bothered by something. My immediate instinct was to propose a conversation. The words were already on the tip of my tongue. "Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it?" But this time, I chose differently. I simply asked if I could help with anything, and when she said she was fine, I respected her answer. Instead of initiating an analysis, I suggested we take a walk after brunch. We walked through the High Line, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about trivial things. At one point, without any prompting, Emily began to talk about what was bothering her, an issue at work. It wasn't about us. It didn't need to be about us. When we returned home, I felt a closeness I hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't the result of having resolved something, but of having shared a space where connection could happen naturally, without being forced under a microscope. Today, I understand that true intimacy isn't something you achieve through a series of planned conversations. It's a garden that grows when we find the balance between actively caring and allowing nature to take its course. Sometimes words are necessary bridges. Other times, they're walls we build without realizing it. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. And paradoxically, it was only when I stopped trying to understand every detail of our relationship that I finally began to truly understand it.